At 2 a.m., a billionaire's wrong call led to an incredible, transformative encounter with a single mother. Jack Donovan leaned back in his plush leather chair, the skyline of Chicago glistening like a false promise beneath him. Emails bombarded his inbox, each ping pressing down on him like the weight of an empire. He rubbed his temples, feeling the suit he wore tailored, expensive become a shackle. The facade of success tightened around him, suffocating. What was the point of it all? Just then, he fumbled for the phone, fingers tapping aimlessly, desperation mingling with the nagging urge to reach out. As he checked one email, a boardroom deal gone awry, he inadvertently dialed. The shrill ring cut through his thoughts. Hello? The voice was soft yet steady, pulling him into an unfamiliar tether. Amanda Reynolds sat wide-eyed, perched on the edge of her sofa, wrestling with the stack of essays laid before her. She almost ignored the call, ready to let it slip into the void. But something, an instinct perhaps, compelled her to answer. As they exchanged introductions, the divide between their worlds felt surreal. His penthouse, her rundown apartment, their contrasting struggles yet the same undercurrent of pressure. Jack spun tales of high-stakes negotiations, while Amanda poured out the relentless grind of educating underprivileged students. You think you know pressure? Jack scoffed, guilt bubbling beneath his bravado. Amanda's laughter was a light in the dimness of his penthouse. Try grading essays while worrying about whether I can afford groceries next week. Weeks turned into a consistent exchange, a lifeline of sorts for Jack. He found himself looking forward to midnight calls, hungry for the authenticity she offered. What began as a distraction spiraled into a friendship that he never knew he needed. Jack marveled at Amanda's passion for her students. Yet, amidst this warm camaraderie, an unsettling feeling churned within him. He had all the resources to make a difference but had spent his life chasing hollow achievements. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The edges of regret sharpened each time he heard Amanda's voice tremble with the weight of her reality. He felt like a voyeur in a life that echoed with resilience. As she rallied against the school's bureaucracy, fighting for her students, he wrestled with his own demons. Could he hold his ground in the world of profit and still be a force for good? Then, during one critical moment where Amanda stood before the school board, her anger palpable, Jack watched from the shadows. She spoke of dreams buried beneath budget cuts and apathy, her voice unwavering. Meanwhile, Jack faced the budding guilt expanding in his chest. Could he really remain a spectator? The moral implications of his privilege hit him like a freight train. As Amanda's passionate plea hung in the air, he realized the divide was never just about money. The call, that wrong dial, had steered him into a reckoning he couldn't avoid. The responsibility struck harder than any boardroom argument he'd ever faced. Was he willing to disrupt his carefully crafted world for her cause? Tension buzzed in his veins, wrestling with the walls he'd built around himself. Would he break free? Or retreat into the very empire that felt like a prison? The atmosphere grew thick as both their lives teetered on a precipice of change, an unsolved equation lingering in the silence, waiting to be answered. The days blurred into a haze of late-night conversations and morning board meetings, Jack's life now at the intersection of privilege and purpose. The extravagant suite that once represented everything in his world was now tainted by the knowledge of Amanda's struggles. Each time he settled into his office, he felt a flicker of rebellion and urge to transform the lavish space into something more meaningful. Jack's mind replayed Amanda's words like a relentless echo. He found himself responding to corporate emails with a stale formality, while his thoughts drifted toward the unyielding realities she faced. Her voice, resolute and passionate, bore the weight of hope and frustration. In contrast, he sat in air-conditioned elegance, facing trivialities that seemed increasingly irrelevant. Yet, amidst this internal chaos, something began to unfurl within him. He identified a burgeoning desire not just to admire Amanda's courage, but to emulate it. The thought took root: if he had the resources, why not create from his position of influence? The notion was a glimmer of daring possibility, and Jack felt for the first time the stirrings of genuine ambition, a passion directed not at profit, but at potential. As he paced across his office, his mind racing with plans, he reflected on what it meant to take action. Could he leverage his connections to educate? Innovate? Inspire? The familiar fear of stepping outside the paradigm he built began to rise like a tide in his gut. But this time, it was buoyed by the exhilarating notion that he could direct his ambition towards something larger than himself, a life that resonated with real significance. His phone buzzed, jolting him back to the present. It was Amanda, her name illuminating the screen. Feeling the electrifying jolt of anticipation, he answered. "Hey, Jack. I didn't want to intrude, but I was hoping you could help me brainstorm some ideas for the school's upcoming fundraiser," she said, her voice an effervescent blend of optimism and the struggle that underscored her reality. "Of course," he replied, more eagerly than he intended. "I might have some ideas worth exploring. Why don't we schedule a meeting?" They settled on a coffee shop, an inconspicuous yet lively space that thrummed with community energy. Jack arrived early, scouting the space and noting its vibrant artwork, a direct contrast to the sterile walls of his office. As he watched students filter in and out, he sensed a shift in his framework of success. Money had never been a problem for him, but improvement was. And here he was, ready to change how he perceived that improvement. When Amanda arrived, the spark in her eyes ignited something deep within him. He saw her as a vessel of change, not just in her classroom, but through him as well. Their conversation delved not only into fundraising ideas but broader visions of possibility, how they could change the narrative for her students. The discussion grew heated with shared passion, and Jack found himself suggesting partnerships with tech firms and local businesses, eyes widening as he envisioned real impact springing forth from his words. But a disquiet lingered, a recognition of resistance brewing beneath the surface. What if the machine of his corporate identity kicked back? What if he lost the allegiance of old allies, the very lifeblood of his empire? He could already hear the skeptics questioning his choices, that gestural shift from capitalist to changemaker. Yet, the stakes had never felt so clear. The meeting spurred Jack on a path of uncomfortable truths. As his mind raced through logistics, he gradually recognized that this wasn't just about Amanda's students anymore, it was about reconstructing his own life's narrative. The diagnosis hung heavily in the air. Now was the moment to turn words into action, to learn what it meant to engage deeply in a struggle that mattered beyond bottom lines. But would he allow the fear of losing comfort to paralyze him, or would he rise heedless of privilege's looming shadow? As they parted, an electrifying unease bubbled under Jack's skin. Change was beckoning him to step forward. He could feel it coiling around him, and he knew this was the beginning of something monumental. A new reality awaited. And it was time to confront not just the apathy of his past, but the very men who embodied the old order, the ones who would resist his infusion of purpose into their transactional world. Could he muster the courage to advocate for something so radically different? Would he risk everything for this newfound mission? Jack's pulse quickened as he contemplated the next steps. Decisions awaited that would either forge his new path or secure his return to comfortable mediocrity. The coffee shop buzzed with activity, yet for Jack, it felt almost muted, as if the world outside had dimmed to focus solely on his inner turmoil. Once invigorated by the prospect of change, he now wrestled with the aftermath of his decision, the weight of uncertainty pushing against his chest. As he navigated the traffic of thoughts swirling in his mind, he realized the conversation with Amanda had ignited a fire, but he was still grappling with how to stoke that flame into a blazing transformation. Doubt seeped in like a slow leak. Could he truly leverage his corporate connections to create meaning? Was he prepared to face the backlash from colleagues who thrived on maintaining the status quo? With each passing moment, the familiar halls of his corporate empire seemed less like a fortress and more like a prison, a construct built on the foundation of profit that now felt utterly hollow. Sitting vulnerably in that crowded cafe, he contemplated how to mobilize his vision into tangible steps. First, there was the matter of solidifying partnership discussions. He mentally revisited strategic pitches he had perfected over years for mundane products and services, but now he wanted to spin these skills towards a cause. The juxtaposition felt jarring, like wearing a tailored suit amidst a group of artists clad in paint-streaked clothes. Could he be taken seriously in this new light? Jack reflected on the stakes, recognizing a visceral need for authenticity in his approach. How could he convince businesses to offer support for young students without a facade of social obligation? They would need to see the impact through the lens of opportunity and growth, something he had to articulate with clarity and passion. Presenting a movement, not merely a campaign, was key. A flicker of anticipation broke through as he made a list of companies whose missions aligned with his new vision. Tech firms focused on educational tools, local businesses keen on community development. Each name sparked ideas for collaboration, igniting a sense of purpose that had long eluded him. But this alone wouldn't suffice. He needed to cultivate allies, not just for the cause but for his own journey into this unfamiliar territory. Remembering Amanda's voice, full of fire and conviction, he decided reaching out to her network would be beneficial. She had inspired him, and perhaps she could plant more seeds of faith in the minds of others. Jack. A voice cut through his reverie. It was James, an old college buddy and seasoned executive, striding towards him with buoyancy only accumulated years of privilege could bring. Jack's heart raced at the prospect of their meeting, turning awkward caution into a gentle reminder of past values. "I haven't seen you in a while. How's everything at work?" Flashing a smile, Jack recalled their countless late-night conversations. But now those nostalgic chats collided with a friction grounded in a growing divergence of ideals. "Things are changing," Jack replied, his throat dry. James raised an inquisitive eyebrow. "Changing how?" A floodgate of thoughts threatened to burst. Should he share his vision, or would he face a flurry of rationalizations and condescension? Jack hesitated, the fork in the road appearing sharp and clear. His mind weighed the potential for camaraderie against vulnerability. Before he could willingly surrender to his doubts, he uttered, "I'm exploring ideas around educational access and empowerment." A flicker of hesitance crossed James's face before it morphed into amusement. "You mean, like charity work? You've always had a soft spot, but really market disruptions are where it's at in our field. You know that." Jack felt the sting of his words, preempting the debate he felt brewing. But isn't there more to success than just projections and profit margins? What about impact? As the two friends articulated opposing philosophies, Jack's resolve deepened. He wasn't merely giving in to idealistic notions, he was confronting the man who epitomized everything he was trying to escape. The discussion turned piercing, but the energy ignited a fierce determination in Jack. If he could hold his ground here, he could wield that strength elsewhere. Their encounter solidified a stark truth: genuine change would require more than advocating from the fringes, he would need to challenge the very foundations of his existence in that corporate world. As they parted, Jack knew these crossroads weren't merely personal, they would shape the societal fabric of the future he yearned to engage with. The pathways were scattered, the possibilities endless, but he felt the weight of a decision looming. Change was not just calling him, it demanded courage and intent. The moment had arrived for confrontation not just with friends, but the entire landscape that had facilitated his past. And with that thought, clarity cut through the noise. He needed a tangible plan to pursue this new venture. Was it possible to reshape his narrative without losing himself in the quagmire of critique and perception? He felt a surge of adrenaline as he grasped that the next steps required not just thought, but action. A campaign not of corporations but of conscience was needed. He resolved that it was time to let the world witness the true power of transformation. A new frontier was waiting. And as Jack walked out of the cafe, he couldn't shake the feeling that even greater challenges lay ahead, testing the very core of his resolve. Would purpose conquer privilege, or would the old order prevail? The stage was set, and the very fabric of his future awaited a single decisive move. The soft glow of his laptop illuminated Jack's face as he sat at his dining table, a makeshift war room for the battle he was preparing to wage. The reality of his vision began to unfurl before him, each keystroke an act of defiance against complacency. The questions that had previously swirled like a storm in his mind now coalesced into a map of actionable steps. Jack opened a blank document titled Notes on Educational Access and Empowerment. He felt a tingle of excitement. This was no longer a vague aspiration. It was a burgeoning initiative that deserved structure and hard details. He began categorizing information, potential partners, strategies for outreach, and metrics for impact. Building a foundation faced with the critiques of traditional metrics required focus. Authenticity had to be his backbone. Each entry invoked a sense of purpose previously dormant in his career. He added bullet points highlighting the issues he had observed: schools underfunded, dropout rates climbing, opportunities limited by socioeconomic status. He scrolled through a Google search for local businesses known for their community involvement. Collaboration was his ticket to legitimacy, and he needed to convey how their contributions could result not just in goodwill, but tangible returns. He paused, feeling a stutter in his heartbeat as he envisioned the cold indifference of corporate stakeholders. Would they truly care about the students, or only about profit margins? This dichotomy was a battleground for his upcoming meetings. Jack's hands hovered above the keys, his thoughts racing. He needed an edge. Though conversations with Amanda had sparked inspiration, it was equally vital to seek out seasoned mentors who had successfully navigated uncharted waters, people willing to challenge his thinking and expand his perspective. Suddenly, a name surfaced from the recesses of his mind, a former professor known for blending entrepreneurship with social purpose. With renewed determination, Jack dialed the professor's number. Anticipating the conversation would hold more than simple pleasantries, he steadied himself. This call represented a leap, an opportunity to sound out his ideas and gain not just insight, but affirmation that he was on the right path or that he was completely off track. "Dr. Simmons," he started once the line connected, his voice steady despite the tremor of anxiety beneath. "It's Jack. Do you have a moment to discuss an initiative I'm working on regarding educational empowerment?" The sound of rustling papers followed, the professor likely leaning back in his chair, intrigued. "Of course, Jack. What's on your mind?" As he articulated his vision, weaving together his plans with every intent of authenticity, Jack found his footing. The professor's nods and thoughtful queries provided the validation he craved. With each suggestion shared how to approach potential backers, articulate impact, and ensure sustainability, Jack felt a growing sense of purpose. By the end of their conversation, an amalgam of advice and encouragement left him buzzing with new possibilities. "Remember, the road is fraught with challenges, but passion can persuade even the hardest of hearts," Dr. Simmons emphasized, his tone grave and invigorating all at once. As he hung up, Jack wordlessly thanked the professor for the unexpected fuel. The path ahead remained uneven, but clarity illuminated his next steps. It wasn't just about the initial pitch. It was about building a narrative that compellingly demonstrated the plight of those impacted and the meaningful ways businesses could engage and invest. Jack made an additional list: non-traditional pitches worthy of persuading skeptics, a storytelling approach that would foster empathy rather than obligation. The fusion of strategy with heartfelt narratives felt like the heart of his mission. Yet, in the depths of this optimism, a nagging thought intruded: there would be opposition, and not just passive indifference. Confrontations loomed on the horizon, faces from his past who revered efficiency and profits above all. Evidently, Jack would need to confront entrenched attitudes head-on. As he glanced at his reflection in the screen, determination washed over him. A campaign based on authentic meaning promised to reshape lives, and in doing so, potentially reshape his own identity within a rigid corporate structure. He was ready to step beyond self-doubt and engage with a world resistant to change. A sudden vibration pulled him from his thoughts. A message from Amanda appeared on his phone. "Hey! Let's get together and brainstorm this week. I have a few connections that might be helpful." Jack felt the surge of energy pulse through him. Could this be the alliance he needed to bolster his message? Could Amanda's network become the bedrock of his ambitions? The stage was set with allies and plans intricately intertwined, but would they hold strong against the coming storm? Jack leaned back in his chair, contemplating not just the struggle ahead, but also the potential reward of a life defined by purpose rather than profit alone. With his heart racing anew, he knew this was more than a personal venture. It could be a catalyst for something expansive. As the sun dipped beneath the horizon outside, the challenges ahead loomed large, and with that clarity came a palpable sense of trepidation and excitement. What new alliances and tests awaited him in this audacious quest? Jack barely slept that night, his thoughts thrumming like a live wire with Amanda's message replaying in his mind. The idea of brainstorming together made him giddy with anticipation. Hours blurred together as he sketched ideas and strategies in the margins of his notes, his mind meticulously analyzing how each connection could add weight to his initiative. Despite his professional resolve, a flicker of insecurity added an unsettling rhythm to his thoughts. Could he articulate his ideas with the clarity and passion they desperately needed? The looming meetings weighed heavy, and Jack found himself questioning the effectiveness of his proposed outreach strategies. Each outline felt like a thread hanging by a single strand. As dawn crept into his living room, the soft light spilled across his array of papers, illuminating the pages filled with loopy handwriting and scrawled conceptualizations. The physical manifestation of his vision was tangible, but inside, doubt gnawed at him. The pressure climbed ever higher, forcing him to consider the possibility of failure. When he finally met Amanda later that week, her presence felt grounding. She exuded a calmness that was both refreshing and invigorating. Her extensive connections and experience seemed to complement Jack's newfound fervor. They settled into a booth at a quiet cafe, and Amanda leaned in, her eyes bright with curiosity. "I've been thinking about your narrative," she said, her tone earnest, "but I think we need to answer why your project matters so much. Beyond the data and facts, what's the story?" Jack inhaled deeply. "But that's just it, isn't it? I'm trying to tell their story, these students who deserve better. But how do I make them feel connected to corporate backers?" A thoughtful silence enveloped them for a moment as Amanda fiddled with her coffee mug. "Draw from your own experiences. People resonate with stories. Share why it matters to you. Why are you in this?" Her question hit him directly in his core. Why was he so invested? He hadn't fully examined his motivations. Do I want to be a hero? Or is there something deeper at play? Jack leaned back, the weight of her inquiry pressing down on him. The realization carved a deeper understanding within him. This was not merely an initiative about educational access, it was an exploration of his identity, a comprehension of his own failures, and a quest to break free from the corporate template he had lived in. Taking her advice, he began weaving personal anecdotes into their discussion, recalling how he himself had felt overlooked during his formative years. He shared stories of mentors who had made a difference, and moments of profound connection he had experienced when learning flourished. With each word spoken, he felt a flicker of strength ignite. Amanda smiled, her quick nods indicating approval. "Now, imagine if you can instill that same sense of vulnerability in your presentations. Show your potential backers who they're really impacting. Create urgency and empathy. Paint the backdrop of struggle, and provide a pathway to hope." Eager sparks flew within him. He could see the lines between facts and narratives beginning to fade, a tapestry rich with possibility. It was a demanding proposition with the potential to rattle the very confines of his vision. He could feel the pendulum of doubt shift slightly as he channeled his focus into applicative strategies derived from emotional storytelling. But as invigorating as the exchange was, a cold reminder lingered in his mind: the corporate stakeholders would require more than just empathy-laden narratives. The daunting prospect of aligning their monetary incentives with the ideals he stood for felt like a wall he had yet to scale. Without warning, a sobering thought struck him: how would he respond if faced with the clinical calculations of profit over purpose? Jack met Amanda's gaze, the implications swirling in the air between them. What if they don't see things the way we do? What if they only care about the bottom line? We anticipate that, Jack. We strategize around it, Amanda stated. There's always a way to frame your initiative as a profitable investment. The moments we create matter, but we must also meet them where they are. Jack swallowed hard, a concoction of hope and fear swirling in his gut. He understood this persistence had to be relentless. The industry was filled with those who believed in one-sided gains. As they delved deeper into strategy, pushing each other's ideas to their limits, a fragile alliance began to form. But could their collaboration withstand the upcoming trials? And more importantly, would Jack have the inner resolve to confront those who viewed his vision as a divestment rather than an investment? Navigating a rapidly shifting landscape that challenged his values and tested his commitment began to resemble a thrilling momentum. Jack could sense the imminent tide, but as their conversation unfolded, questions of integrity loomed larger. He emerged from the cafe feeling a rush, charged with purpose yet held back by murky uncertainties. What steps would he take to confront the skepticism ahead? The line between advocacy and survival was thin, and his next move would either fortify his mission or send it into the abyss. The stakes were rising. Jack's mind was alive with newfound perspectives as he exited the cafe. He had pieced together a compelling framework for his presentation, but beneath his excitement lay a quagmire of doubt. The words Amanda had shared still echoed in his thoughts. As he walked, the city bustled around him. Cars honked, pedestrians chattered, and life unfolded in effortless normalcy, contrasting sharply with the tumult in his heart. Caught up in his internal dialogue, Jack found himself at a crossroads. He could sense that the upcoming meetings would reveal not just the potential of his project but also his capacity to advocate for it. Would he be able to harness the stories of resilience he shared with Amanda? In a world dominated by fiscal concerns, could he frame those stories within an economic narrative that resonated with backers? He turned a corner, the sun casting long shadows, sunlight flickering between buildings like the flicker of hope testing his resolve. Each step felt like a rehearsal for the challenges looming ahead. Yet, as clarity began to surface, Jack also grappled with his history in corporate America, his comfortable but stifling life where success was measured solely by profit margins. Despite the impending pressure, a new perception altered his view. The choice was laid bare before him: he could return to a life defined by numbers and ambitions that were not his own, or he could forge a path rooted in authenticity and purpose. This initiative was not just a project, it was his rebellion against a life of mediocrity. As Jack arrived at his office, he was engulfed in the familiar chaos of emails and unscheduled requests, but today he looked beyond the routine. He took a deep breath and resolved to focus on what was essential: his purpose. Dismissing distractions, he allocated time specifically to refine his pitch. Each iteration blended personal anecdotes with solid facts about the impact of educational disparities. Gratitude surged when reflecting on his journey and the moments that shaped his desire to make a difference. Days passed in a whirlwind of drafting and coaching sessions with Amanda. They ran through scenarios, critiques, and adjustments that stretched Jack's capabilities in ways he hadn't expected. With each meeting, Amanda's feedback honed his presentation into something wieldy and potent. Yet, there was an undercurrent of unease and unmeasurable tension existed between his personal aspirations and the corporate world's demands. Then came the invitation: a pivotal presentation to a room full of influential stakeholders, powerful players whose decisions could propel his vision forward or bury it in a sea of indifference. As he read the email, adrenaline coursed through him. Yet mingled with the thrill was fear. What if they dismissed his perspective? What if his vulnerability was seen as weakness instead of strength? He could feel the churning in his stomach, unsettling and relentless. In the days leading up to the presentation, Jack found himself plagued by a haunting question: could he find the right words to bridge the chasm between authentic storytelling and revenue-driven expectations? He reached out to Amanda, who reassured him. "This is your moment, Jack. Focus not just on the numbers or the ideals, but on the opportunity to create change while meeting them in their world." In that moment, clarity cut through his dread. Jack decided he would embrace both elements: his emotional connection to the mission and the pragmatism required by the stakeholders. Harnessing his dual approach, he began refining focused narratives that emphasized the tangible benefits of investing in education while intertwining personal stakes to foster emotional engagement. As Jack combined these elements, he felt a shift within himself. The fragmented doubts began to coalesce into an empowering resolve. He walked to the conference room on the day of the presentation with a deepened understanding of his purpose and the realization that he was capable of juggling both empathy and results. But the stakes would be higher than he anticipated. As he approached the microphone, he glanced around the room, the faces watching him with keen interest and skepticism. In that instant, he understood that vulnerability would have to coexist with conviction. The moment was upon him, but could he truly deliver the presentation that would align his mission with their interests? Would he rise to face not just the scrutiny of the audience but also the deeper battle within himself? The air hung thick with tension as Jack began to speak, knowing that the outcome could either reinforce his purpose or unravel it entirely. Jack's voice trembled slightly at the beginning, but as he spoke, he slowly found his rhythm. An electric tension filled the conference room. He crafted a narrative that pulsed with urgency, challenging the assembled stakeholders to consider the real-world implications of their choices. He wove in statistics about educational disparities, but also shared a poignant story from his own life that illustrated the power of mentorship. He wanted them not just to hear the numbers, but to feel the truth behind them. With every word, Jack embraced the vulnerability he had long feared. He noticed the shifting expressions on the faces before him, the flicker of interest, the narrowing of skeptical eyebrows, and occasionally, the softening of judgment. It was a delicate dance, balancing the emotional weight of his personal connections with the undeniable reality of financial implications. He could sense an openness starting to emerge, a possibility that they were beginning to connect with him on a deeper level. But then he hit a snag. A gruff voice from the back interrupted him, a senior executive known for his brusque demeanor. "This is all great, Jack, but how realistic is this? You're just painting a pretty picture without acknowledging where the money comes from." In that moment, Jack felt the ground shift beneath him. Doubt clawed at his confidence. Had he painted too idealistic a picture? Could he get back to his message? Taking a deep breath, he reminded himself of Amanda's encouraging words: his triumph lay not in justifying every doubt, but in rallying their shared purpose. "It's true that we face significant challenges," he responded, his voice steadier now. "But these challenges also present immense opportunities. Investing in education today doesn't just provide immediate returns, it fosters a workforce capable of innovation and growth years into the future. I'm not suggesting a charity, I'm proposing a partnership where we all benefit." The room shifted again. He felt a glimmer of hope as he saw heads nodding, some even leaning in slightly. His heart raced with renewed determination. Each amenable gesture spurred him onward, propelling his narrative to the next level. Yet just as momentum built, a lingering question began to gnaw at him: was he truly prepared to face a backlash if they didn't agree? Was he willing to risk everything he had invested into this vision? The capacity to challenge himself had grown, but the fear of rejection loomed larger than ever. He pressed forward, zeroing in on the economic framework he had developed. Imagine a world where educational inequality is addressed not just through funds but through actionable strategies we create together. By choosing to invest in programs that yield real-world outcomes, we shift the focus from immediate profits to long-term sustainability. His conviction rang true, bolstering the narrative he had built with Amanda. From the corners of his mind emerged flashes of affirmation, clear images of what success looked like not just in profits, but in lives transformed. Still, with every point he made, Jack could feel the pushback was on the horizon. Could he withstand the heavy scrutiny that loser projections could invoke? The clock ticked ominously, reminding him that time was running out, and the presentation neared its critical juncture. As he rounded off his pitch, he found himself looking directly into the eyes of a key investor known for her intimidating presence. The stakes elevated sharply. Would she see beyond his passion? Would she recognize the depth of his commitment? Or was she merely assessing his potential for future returns? The air crackled with anticipation as Jack awaited her response. Yet, even as he prepared to hear what could shape his future, deep down, he felt a burgeoning realization. Today's confrontation with uncertainty was forging a stronger version of himself, one who would champion authenticity in a world that often celebrated facades. The door to change was ajar, but could he truly step through, or would he retreat when faced with the harsh evaluations to come? Jack braced himself for the response that could tilt the balance of his ambitions. How would he navigate the consequences of this pivotal moment? The room fell silent, the collective breath held as Jack's unsteady heart raced against the ticking clock. Just as the stillness threatened to drown him, the investor leaned forward, her eyes piercing but curious. "You make a compelling argument, Jack. But tell me, if you were in my shoes, what assurances would you need to greenlight such an investment?" The question, sharp and incisive, pierced through the fog of anxiety swirling in Jack's mind. This was the moment he had anticipated, an opportunity to extend the conversation beyond mere optimism into tangible terms. He could feel the weight of her gaze, the unyielding pressure to apply logic to the passion he so passionately poured out. "I would outline clear metrics of success for the initiatives," he replied, steadiness returning to his voice. "Each project would have defined outcomes measured at set intervals. We wouldn't just invest in education. We create a feedback loop where we evaluate, adjust, and adapt our strategies in real time. If those outcomes aren't met, I don't expect any funding moving forward." The nods around the room seemed to echo a shared respect for accountability, a sizzling wave of understanding shifting beneath the surface. Jack felt a rush of adrenaline, fueled not just by his response but by the possibility that he might actually sway the decision-makers. Yet, he also felt a nagging hollowness inside. What if the measures he proposed lacked the humanities that inspired him? "But those metrics can only encapsulate part of our vision," he thought. As if sensing his internal struggle, the investor raised an eyebrow. "Then what's the alternative?" Faced with the challenge to expand his framework, Jack's mind sparked. "What we need is qualitative data alongside quantitative. The stories behind our numbers, the lives changed, the communities uplifted. We have to measure progress not just as a sum of scores but as a reflection of societal growth and personal empowerment." He could feel the room shift again, the air thickening with intrigue. He had crossed a line, moving from a pure profit-driven agenda to a broader, more impactful conversation. Jack discerned the investor's transformation. Her skepticism was being tempered by curiosity, perhaps even inspiration. But doubt nagged at him again. Was he being too idealistic? The investor leaned back slightly, arms crossed, contemplating his ideas. Jack seized the moment, drawing from his own story. "I remember a student I mentored, a brilliant kid with potential sparked from within but suppressed by systematic obstacles. With the right support and guidance, he excelled beyond what he or I ever imagined. It's these individual stories that awaken awareness, igniting change on a personal level." Each word steered Jack deeper into uncharted territories of his own vulnerability. The personal stakes of his presentation now mirrored the professional risks he had chosen to embrace. He was illuminating what had seemed dark before, not just for them, but for himself. "Your story is powerful, but how do we implement that scale?" she pressed, skepticism creeping back. Jack paused, steeling himself. "We become the catalyst for mentorship and support systems. We empower local leaders to nurture potential in their communities, thus creating a ripple effect. We don't just deliver funding, we empower transformation." A murmur of agreement rippled throughout the conference room. Before he could process the shift, another executive interjected, "Fairy tale narratives 1T cut it, Jack. If we're not considering the return on investment with clear strategies, we're wasting our time." Jack's heart raced as the sentiment shifted again to a more combative stance. That's a valid point. Yet without envisaging a bigger purpose, what are we truly investing in? If we see educational inequality as a systemic problem that threatens our future workforce, the long-term costs will far exceed our initial investment. Time pressed on, yet Jack felt anchored by a growing resolve within himself. He was no longer just advocating an idea, he was fighting to empower uninformed voices. Finally, the investor responded, a flicker of respect glimmering in her sharp gaze. "You've got 5 minutes left, Jack. Make them count." Time had run out, and yet Jack felt like he was just beginning. The spark was undeniable, he had ignited a foundation for a conversation that challenged the status quo. Could he consolidate this momentum into actionable steps for lasting impact? As he gathered himself for a final push, one thought consumed him: this wasn't just about winning over investors, it was about vindicating a vision and securing a place for mentorship at the heart of transformation. A wave of determination filled him anew. Jack was ready to shift the dynamics, but would the vision hold when met with the real-world scrutiny that lay ahead? Would they join him, or leave him standing on the precipice alone? He centered himself, preparing to not just close the presentation, but to open the door to something far greater. Time to convert odds into opportunity, thoughts into action. In the next few seconds, Jack's path could redefine everything. But would he dare take the leap? Jack took a deep breath, the air thick with possibilities and doubts as the seconds ticked away. He could feel the weight of the room pressing against him, a compendium of skepticism and anticipation. With a newfound resolve, he decided it was time to distill his vision into something that resonated deeply, not just intellectually but emotionally. "We're not just investing in education, we're investing in the very fabric of our society," he declared, his voice steadier than it had been at the start. "Each dollar we allocate is a seed planted in the ground. The question is, what kind of tree will it become? Will it bear fruit for immediate consumption or grow into a shade tree that nurtures generations? That's the essence of our mission: sustainable growth founded on mentorship and empowerment." He could see the flicker of curiosity in the investor's eyes, a momentary crack in the veneer of skepticism. It felt like an opening, a chance to drive his point home. Jack straightened his posture, leaning into the burgeoning momentum. Imagine a world where every young person has a guide, someone who believes in their potential. We need to build networks of mentors, not just superficial connections but deep-rooted relationships where wisdom is transferred and confidence is cultivated. We are talking about creating a culture of continuous learning and development. The murmurs around the room took on a different tone now, he could feel them shifting from resistance to contemplation. Yet, somewhere inside him, a sense of dread lurked. What if he was drawing a picture too idealistic, too far removed from the practicalities of profit margins and return on investment? And to achieve this, Jack continued, we must couple our investments with measurable results, both qualitative and quantitative. Picture programs where each mentor-mentee relationship includes assessments of growth not just academically, but personally and socially. We need strategies that respond dynamically to how young lives are evolving. What he hadn't anticipated was the genuine engagement of one of the executive team members, a woman with her arms crossed who had previously been skeptical. "You speak of these lofty ideals, Jack. But what makes you so sure that people want this? That they will engage with these programs you're laying out?" Jack paused, wrestling momentarily with the challenge. He could feel the room's gaze shift back toward skepticism, yet he knew this was an opportunity to bridge his personal experience into a wider narrative. "Because I have lived it," he said, sincerity woven into every word. "A mentor saved me from a path that promised only weariness and regret. I've seen firsthand what happens when someone offers their time, their wisdom, their support. The light that ignites within a person when they realize they're not alone in their journey. It's transformative. His heart raced. Jack recognized that he wasn't merely recalling a story, he was embodying the mission. He had come to feel that this moment transcended his aspirations, entwining with the very reasons he sought to create change. The memories of sleepless nights spent worrying about his own life challenges surged through him, each one a reminder of the despair that could be transformed into hope. The air thickened as he pressed on. Investing in people isn't just a charitable act, it's a fundamental strategy for a thriving economy and society. By fostering capabilities, we are directly impacting productivity, innovation, and resilience. Jack's voice carried an urgency, a pull toward collective action. He could feel the wall of doubt beginning to crumble. In that moment, it felt as if clarity was seeping through the cracks. But with clarity came the weight of responsibility. Could he convince them that this wasn't just another pitch, but a genuine pathway to the future? As Jack neared the conclusion of his presentation, he sensed the electricity in the room, a palpable shift of energy that dared him to take one more risk. I stand here not just as a businessman, but as a believer in a vision that reshapes lives. What if we redefine success together? The investor's once steely gaze softened. Then show us more than beautiful narratives, Jack. Make us understand how this transformation will manifest in concrete terms. Jack's mind raced. The question posed opened a new avenue, a call to action he couldn't ignore. He had the vision, yet he needed a blueprint to solidify it. Could he weave together a practical plan that combined both inspiration and strategy? Just as he prepared to respond, the familiar queasy sensation of self-doubt crept in. Was he ready to confront the real-life challenges that awaited, the obstacles that would inevitably arise when turning principles into practice? Jack gathered his courage, knowing that the next move would either consolidate his burgeoning influence or extinguish the flicker of hope he dared to spark. Was he ready to face the unexpected challenges of implementation, forcing him to stretch past the boundaries of his comfort zone, or would the narrative remain just that, an unfulfilled possibility? He could feel time closing in, the ticking clock reminding him that the moment was delicate. The chance for growth lay just ahead. But would he grasp it, or let it slip away? The conference room buzzed with anticipation as Jack gathered himself, the stakes looming larger than ever. He might have stepped into this presentation filled with uncertainty, but now he stood at a precipice of accomplishment. With each word, he felt the transformation sweeping through him, solidifying his resolve to confront his past and redefine success. Thank you for your questions and insights. Now, let me lay out the pathway ahead, Jack began, channeling the energy of the room. He noticed nods of approval from some stakeholders who had previously been skeptical. The tides were turning. We will construct an initiative built on mentor-mentee partnerships. The framework will incorporate not only educational access but also targeted training programs that foster both academic and personal growth. Together, we can create specific benchmarks for success. Benchmarks we'll revisit regularly. Jack's fingers brushed over the pages he had prepared, filled with proposals of collaboration with local businesses, schools, and nonprofits. He painted a picture of a network, one where each participant contributed, fueled by profit motives while intertwining social responsibility. In this plan, he continued, we will implement mentorship programs that will be tracked through data-driven assessments, bringing tangible outcomes into focus. We'll not only support academic performances but also address emotional and social skills development, measuring the holistic growth of our students. In that moment, Jack felt a shift not just within the room but within himself. This was not merely a presentation, it was the manifestation of his journey, a convergence of old ideals crumbling and new aspirations blossoming before his eyes. The fear that had once clawed at his insides transformed into resolve. As he made eye contact with the investor who had posed the pressing question earlier, he noticed a spark of engagement. She leaned in, genuinely interested. Her presence served as a beacon, urging him onward. Jack pressed on, I want our partners to see that beyond their investment, we are also nurturing their future workforce. Supporting education today means empowering innovation and creativity that will propel our collective industries forward. This is not a charity but an investment, a winning strategy for future generations. A reverberation of excitement washed over the room. Jack could feel it. The narrative was connecting, and in that energy, he sensed real potential for change. He took a breath, relaxing into the moment, embracing the idea that vulnerability and authenticity could coexist with corporate pragmatism. By choosing to embrace this initiative, you will not only invest in education but actually pave the way for a sustainable business model that thrives on given opportunities for empowerment. As he concluded, Jack witnessed the transformation of the room around him. Executives who once sat with arms crossed were now jotting down notes, leaning forward, their apprehension replaced by an interest that felt palpable. Each nod served as a stepping stone toward not just acceptance but potential partnership. The investor stood, embodying decisive authority. "We are impressed by your passion and the structure you've proposed, Jack. We'd like to explore this idea further and begin formulating a partnership plan that will adequately address our needs as stakeholders." In that moment, a wave of exhilaration crashed over him, whispers of disbelief fighting to break through the surface of elation. Jack recognized the metamorphosis not just in the eyes of the investors, but within himself. He had shifted from a man confined by the walls of corporate expectation to one determined to infuse meaning into his work. Week by week, the plan unfolded, Jack working closely with Amanda and a growing coalition of supportive allies. Each new partnership and mentorship project launched solidified his conviction. Concrete metrics began reflecting student growth, feedback sessions highlighted personal anecdotes of transformation, and the sense of purpose within himself blossomed further. Months later, as he stood at the helm of the initiative's launch event, Jack beamed at the energetic crowd of mentors and students. The fruits of their labor were manifesting before him. Individual lives were beginning to transform around a foundation built on mutual belief in potential and resilience. Jack felt a profound sense of validation as he looked out at the smiling faces. He had reinvented not only his professional identity but embraced a newfound commitment to societal responsibility. This was no longer just about financial success, it was about impact and meaningful connection, a vision embodied through each student and mentor. In that operation of joy and heartfelt pride, he realized that true achievement lay in the nuance of his journey. His transformation, once propelled by uncertainty and fear, had now solidified a partnership with purpose at its core. He had faced the fears of judgment and rejection, turned them into fuel for growth, and emerged resolutely transformed. Jack Donovan stood tall, recognized not just as a corporate leader but as a changemaker. He had flipped the narrative of privilege into promise. The strides he had taken echoed with purpose, and as he looked towards the horizon, he held undeniable confidence. He was no longer merely chasing success, he was now achieving it through authenticity and impact. This was not just a conclusion, it was the beginning of a movement, one born from a wrong call that led him to right a multitude of lives. Now, you too must take action. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, every click truly makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about this ending below. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share this message of personal overcoming and achievement.